Clara Whitmore had always believed that fear had a particular sound, like a screen door slamming in the middle of the night, or a coyote's cry drifting too close to the barn. But on this cold New Mexico afternoon, fear came roaring in the form of pounding hooves and the cracking of rifle shots. She had been gathering winter wood behind her father's homestead when the rustlers thundered in. Dust billowed around their horses, and the men's faces were masked with dirty bandanas. Clara barely had time to drop her bundle before rough hands grabbed her. She fought them, kicked, clawed, screamed, because that was how her father raised her. Whitmore women didn't fold. They didn't bow. And they sure didn't surrender. But one outlaw swung the butt of his rifle hard. The blow sent Clara crashing to her knees, the world spinning in dizzy circles. Through her blurred vision she heard them arguing. Take her. No, leave her. She'll slow us down. She saw us. Ain't leaving no witnesses. Clara's heart thrashed in her chest. She braced for another strike. But before the rustler could raise his rifle again, a sharp whistle sliced through the air. Then everything changed. From the edge of the cedar thicket stepped a man unlike any she had seen, tall, broad-shouldered, hair braided with strips of red cloth, and eyes dark as obsidian. His presence alone made the rustlers hesitate. An Apache. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He simply moved with a lethal calm, his bow already drawn back, arrow aimed with terrifying precision. One outlaw lunged for his gun, but the Apache loosed the arrow faster. It struck the rustler's hat, pinning it to a tree trunk with a thud. A warning. A promise. The rustlers scattered like coyotes chased from a carcass. Clara watched them disappear over the ridge, their curses fading into the wind. Silence fell heavy on the homestead. Only the wheeze of her own breath remained. The Apache lowered his bow and approached. Clara tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She wasn't afraid, at least not like she had been with the rustlers. But she was wary. Everyone in town had stories about the Apache, most of them exaggerated, some downright false. But legends travel faster than truth does on the frontier, and she couldn't help but remember every warning she'd ever heard. He stopped 2 steps away, studying her with a steady gaze. "You are hurt," he said, his English accented but clear. "I'm fine," Clara lied. Thunder cracked in the distance, and she realized storm clouds had crept over the hills. The cold wind stung her bruised cheek. The Apache glanced at the sky, then back at her. "Not safe here," he said. "Night comes fast." Clara looked around. Her father was away trading in town. The rustlers could return, and she could barely stand upright. Still, going with a stranger, an Apache stranger, felt reckless. He must have seen her hesitation because he added, "I protect you. Storm very bad tonight." His voice held no threat, only certainty. And something inside her, instinct or fate, told her he meant it. When her second attempt to stand failed, he stepped forward. Before she could protest, he lifted her. Not roughly, not possessively, just firmly. As one might lift someone they were determined to save. The rain began falling in hard. Cold sheets by the time they reached his shelter, an expertly built wickiup tucked beneath a rocky overhang. Smoke drifted from its vent hole, promising warmth. Inside, the fire crackled softly. Furs lined the floor, thick enough to chase away the cold. Clara hesitated near the entrance, shivering. The Apache gestured toward the furs. "Sit," he said quietly. But when she nearly collapsed again, he stepped in, guiding her gently but decisively down onto the warm pelts. "You're safe with me now," he said, his voice low but steady. "Act like someone who wants to live." The word struck her not as a command, but as a reminder. She did want to live. She had fought for it, had almost lost it, and now here she was, protected by a man everyone warned her about. Clara met his eyes, and for the first time since the attack, her heart stopped racing. Fear faded. Warmth returned. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, two very different worlds sat only a fire's width apart, and Clara realized this night would change her life forever. The storm outside did not merely fall, it roared. Rain hammered against the hide-covered frame of the wickiup like fists demanding entry, and the wind shrieked through the canyon as though angry at being kept out. But inside, the air was warm, still, and scented faintly with sage and smoke. Clara sat on the furs with her knees pulled to her chest. Her cheek throbbed where the rustler had hit her, but the deeper ache was in the part of her mind still reeling from the day's chaos. One moment she'd been gathering wood. The next, her world had shattered, then been saved by a man she'd been taught to fear. The Apache, he had not yet given her his name, sat cross-legged across the fire, adding a piece of cedar to the flames. The new wood brightened the inside of the shelter, throwing amber light along the smooth lines of his face. For a long time, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, just different. In her world, silence usually meant danger. Here, it felt like respect. Finally, he broke it. "You are cold." It wasn't a question. He saw the way her fingers trembled. "I'm all right," Clara answered automatically, the same way she spoke to her father after a long day's chores. The Apache arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. He reached behind him and pulled a heavy buffalo hide closer, then extended it toward her. Clara hesitated, her upbringing clashing with her survival instincts, but accepted it. The hide was warm from the fire, and she felt her body relax the moment it draped over her shoulders. He nodded once, satisfied. "My name is Taza," he said. Clara swallowed. "I'm Clara Whitmore." He repeated her name with soft precision, as though tasting each syllable. Clara. Hearing her name in his deep, even voice made her heart stutter. Outside, lightning flashed. The wickiup shook slightly, and Clara flinched. Taza watched the movement, not judging her, simply observing. "You fought them," he said. "Most do not fight when they are outnumbered." Clara looked toward the fire. "My father taught me to defend myself. He always said a woman should know how to stand her ground." Taza nodded. "A good teaching." They sat in quiet again, the fire snapping between them. Eventually, he began speaking slowly, carefully, as though he rarely shared such things. "I followed those men for many days," he said. "They took horses from my people. They hurt travelers. I promised to find them." Clara blinked. "So rescuing me wasn't your plan?" His mouth twitched, almost into a smile. "No, my plan was to track them. But then I heard you scream." Her cheeks warmed. "I didn't think anyone would hear." "In the canyons," he said, gesturing toward the shelter wall, "every sound travels far. Your fear reached me." Clara felt her chest tighten. "Thank you for coming." Taza bowed his head once. Not dramatically, not pridefully, simply acknowledging truth. When she said nothing more, he continued, voice lower now. "My sister. She was taken by white outlaws many winters ago." Clara's breath caught. "I'm so sorry. She was young. She never came back." His eyes didn't harden, but the pain behind them was unmistakable. "Since then, I do not allow such men to take anyone. Not from my people. Not from yours. No difference." The simplicity of that belief hit Clara harder than the storm outside. No difference. Not Apache and white. Just people. Just right and wrong. The firelight played across his features, and she wondered how many nights he had hunted those rustlers alone, driven by grief and duty. Most stories we hear in town paint the Apache as dangerous, Clara admitted quietly. "But you risked your life for me today." Taza met her eyes. "Many stories in my world say settlers take land because they are greedy and cruel." He tilted his head. "Some are. Some are not. Stories paint with broad brush. People are smaller and more complicated. Clara felt the truth of that settle deep in her bones. She had been taught fear. He had been taught caution. But sitting here, sharing firelight and silence, those lessons felt small. A gust of wind shook the shelter, and Clara startled again. Instantly, Taza reached for a fur and tossed it over the door flap, reinforcing it. Then he moved to sit slightly closer, not touching her, not crowding, just nearer. A quiet reassurance. "You are safe here," he said. The words were simple, but they wrapped around her like the warm hide on her shoulders. Clara watched him through the flickering fire. Understanding finally settling in. This man wasn't her captor, wasn't her enemy, he was her protector. Her lifeline in a night the frontier had designed to break her. 2 cultures, 2 worlds. But one small fire, one shared shelter, and one undeniable truth. They needed each other to make it through the night. Dawn broke pale and gray over the canyon, washing the rocky landscape in soft light. The storm had passed, leaving a sharp scent of wet earth and cedar in the air. Clara had slept fitfully on the furs, her dreams a jumble of rustlers' faces and the protective presence of Taza beside her. When she finally opened her eyes, he was already tending to his horse, his movements deliberate, calm, and precise. "You need to return home," he said without looking at her, voice low and steady. "Your father will worry. Rustlers may follow." Clara struggled to her feet, still sore from the previous day's struggle. Every muscle in her body ached, but she was determined not to stumble. "I can ride," she said. "I'm strong enough." Taza's eyes, dark and watchful, studied her for a long moment. Then, without a word, he lifted the furs they had slept on and rolled them onto his saddle. He led their horses to the canyon trail, motioning for Clara to follow. She swung into the saddle, feeling the familiar thrill of riding, but tempered now by the memory of danger. The trail was narrow, winding along a ridge with sheer drops on one side. Clara's heart pounded as she glanced down the steep canyon walls. Taza rode beside her, one hand on the reins, the other lightly resting on his bow. Every so often, his sharp gaze swept the landscape, alert for movement. Hours passed, and just as Clara was beginning to believe the danger had truly passed, Taza froze, his horse snorting and stamping. From the ridgeline ahead, a shout rang out, and the shadow of a horseman appeared, a rustler. Then another, and another. Clara's stomach clenched. The men were back, and they looked angrier than before. "Stay close," Taza warned, his voice barely above a whisper, but full of command. He leaned forward in the saddle, drawing an arrow from his quiver. "Do exactly as I do." Clara gripped her rifle, her hands trembling slightly. Her father had taught her to shoot, but she had never faced this kind of fear before. She remembered the swing of the rifle that had knocked her to the ground yesterday, the helplessness she had felt. And now she was determined to act. The first rustler surged forward, gun raised. Taza released an arrow with precision, striking the weapon from the man's hands. Clara fired as the second rider drew near, the bullet grazing the rustler's shoulder. The third tried to flank them, but Taza swung his horse with uncanny agility, forcing the rider to halt abruptly. The clash was chaotic. But Clara noticed something remarkable. Taza never once lost control. He moved as if the canyon itself guided him. She realized that every movement she made beside him mattered, and she adjusted instinctively, trusting his rhythm. After several tense minutes that felt like hours, the remaining rustlers turned. They had underestimated the para white woman who could shoot, and an Apache warrior who moved like wind through the canyon. With curses and desperate shouts, the outlaws fled over the ridge, disappearing into the wilderness. Clara exhaled, her chest heaving, adrenaline still thrumming in her veins. We did it," she whispered, disbelief in her voice. Taza shook his head slightly. not in frustration, but almost as if surprised by her own strength. "You fought well." "You did not hesitate." His gaze softened, and for the first time, Clara noticed a hint of admiration in his eyes. Mixed with relief, she lowered her rifle, still trembling. I never thought I could do that," she admitted. Her voice caught with emotion. "I was so afraid yesterday. And yet—" She looked at him. "You trusted me." Taza said nothing immediately, but his eyes met hers in a way that needed no words. Clara understood then that trust was not given lightly. It was earned. And in the heat of battle, they had earned it together. As they resumed the ride home, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the canyon walls in warm golds and reds. The storm's violence was gone, replaced by calm, by light, by the kind of peace that comes after surviving something harrowing together. Clara's body ached, her mind was tired, but her heart felt something entirely new, a connection, a recognition that they were no longer merely rescuer and rescued. They were partners for this moment and perhaps for the moments to come. For the first time since the attack, Clara felt hope. She could survive the frontier's dangers and maybe, just maybe, she could find a life that included Taza. The sight of the Whitmore homestead rising from the misted valley should have brought Clara relief. Familiar fences, the barn and the windmill standing stubbornly against the sky, all markers of home. Yet, as they rode closer, a different unease settled over her. Taza's dark eyes scanned the horizon, alert, but Clara noticed that even he seemed wary. The neighbors had gathered. Men on horseback, some leaning on rifles, their faces drawn with suspicion. Women peered from doorways, whispers carried on the morning wind. News of her disappearance and miraculous rescue had traveled faster than she had expected, and rumor had twisted it, as rumors often did in frontier towns. As Clara guided her horse into the yard, whispers turned into outright calls. "Who's this Apache?" One man shouted. "Doesn't belong here." Another added, "We don't want your kind in our town." Clara's stomach tightened. She had always known prejudice was part of life on the frontier, but seeing it directed at Taza, her protector, felt sharper than any rustler's blow. Taza dismounted quietly, his presence calm yet commanding. He kept his bow slung across his back, his eyes sweeping the yard, noting every hand on a weapon. He made no move to provoke, only to protect. Clara stepped forward, placing herself between Taza and the crowd. Her voice, clear and steady, cut through the morning air. "He saved my life. He owes you nothing, and I owe him everything. If you want to speak, speak to me, not him." A tense silence followed. The men shifted uneasily. Some still had hands near rifles, but the authority in Clara's tone, the confidence she had gained during the ride, demanded attention. Her father emerged from the porch, his rugged face lined with years of hardship. At first his eyes flickered with fear at Taza's presence, but he studied the man, the calm composure, the disciplined stance, the way he seemed ready to protect without aggression. He noted Clara standing tall, her eyes bright and unflinching. Finally he said, gruffly, "Well, seems he's done right by you." The crowd murmured, some grudgingly accepting the father's assessment. Others, reluctant to give way, remained skeptical. But Taza did not argue. He said nothing more, allowing Clara to speak for both of them. Over the next hours, Clara explained how Taza had tracked the rustlers, fought them, and ensured her safe return. She detailed their journey through the canyon, emphasizing her own participation in their defense. Each word chipped away at the fear and prejudice that had arisen, replacing it with awe and respect. By midday, the tension had eased. Some neighbors approached with tentative questions about the canyon, the rustlers, and the bravery required to survive such an ambush. Taza answered with simple honesty, no arrogance, no boast. He spoke of tracking, survival, and respect for the land-sharing knowledge of the Apache way without condescension. Clara watched him and felt a swell of pride, not just because he had saved her, but because he had faced ignorance and suspicion with dignity. She realized that heroism was not only about fighting outlaws, it was also about enduring fear, prejudice, and misunderstanding with calm resolve. Her father finally came to her side, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've grown," he said quietly. "You're not a girl anymore, Clara, and neither is he just a stranger. I see that now." Clara smiled, relief washing over her. For the first time, the Whitmore homestead, her home, felt like a place where both worlds could coexist. It was not perfect. Prejudice lingered like the shadows of the fence posts in the morning sun. But she knew that courage, respect, and truth could carve a bridge where suspicion had once stood. Taza did not linger long. He remained at the edge of the yard, silently observing the shift in attitude. His duty was done here for now. Clara wanted to ask him to stay, to make the world they had survived together more permanent, but she held back, understanding that trust and choice could not be forced. That evening, as the sun sank behind a distant mesa and painted the sky with crimson and gold, Clara reflected on the day. She had faced not only rustlers but fear, mistrust, and societal prejudice. Yet she had not yielded, and she had a sense that somehow this was only the beginning of a larger journey, not just for survival, but for understanding, connection, and maybe even love. The frontier could be cruel and wild, but Clara Whitmore now understood that courage, compassion, and an open heart were just as necessary as strength, rifle, and horse. And in the quiet glow of the ranch at sunset, she felt a quiet certainty. She had survived, she had learned, and she had someone who believed in her Taza just as she believed in him. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of sage and freshly turned soil. Clara woke before the sun, her mind still restless from the previous days of chaos. Rustlers, storms, prejudice, and fear had marked every moment, yet a new feeling had begun to settle in her chest. Choice. She could return fully to her old life on the ranch, carrying stories of danger and survival, where she could step into an unknown path alongside Taza, the Apache warrior who had saved her life more than once. She found him outside, tending to the horses, the rising sun casting long shadows across the yard. Taza worked silently, the early light glinting off the bow slung across his back and the braided strips of red cloth in his hair. He looked up as she approached, his expression calm but guarded. "You are ready," he said, stating what Clara already knew. I think so," she replied, her voice shaking slightly. "But this is your choice too, isn't it? You could leave now, go back to your people, your path." Taza shook his head. "I am bound by duty, Clara, but sometimes duty is not only about tracking outlaws or protecting my people. Sometimes it is about protecting what is right in front of me." His eyes softened. "And right now, that is you." Clara felt her heart tighten. The weight of his words made the decision feel both impossible and inevitable. She had spent her life learning to survive alone, to endure hardships without leaning on anyone. Yet here, standing in the golden light of a new day, she realized survival was not the same as living. Living required choice, trust, and sometimes courage in ways that went beyond firepower or physical strength. I want to go with you," she said finally, steadying herself. "I want to learn, to see your world, to share it. And I want to stay by your side." Taza studied her, the wind stirring the furs around his shoulders. For a moment, he said nothing, weighing her words, feeling their truth. Then he extended his hand, not as a command, but as an invitation. "Then you choose," he said. "You choose freely, as all who follow me must. Will you follow?" Clara took his hand, the warmth of his skin surprising her, grounding her. She felt the rhythm of his pulse, steady and sure, and in that instant, the fear that had haunted her melted away. "I choose," she whispered. They mounted their horses and began down the trail, the canyon opening before them like a promise. The morning light glinted on the rocky cliffs, and for the first time, Clara allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the confines of her father's ranch. A life that included adventure, danger, learning, and even love. The journey was not easy. Clara had to adapt to new ways of riding, tracking, and understanding the land. Taza taught her the Apache methods of reading animal tracks, finding water in arid terrain, and using the wind to detect distant movement. Each lesson was a test, not only of her skill but of her courage and willingness to trust. She stumbled at first, frustrated by the differences between her world and his, but Taza's patience never faltered. At night, they made camp under the stars. Clara learned to gather kindling, prepare meals over an open fire, and respect the delicate balance of the land. Taza taught her Apache words and customs, explaining their meaning and significance. Through these lessons, Clara came to see the depth of a culture that many settlers dismissed or feared. She understood that honor, courage, and respect were universal, even if expressed differently. One evening, as they sat side by side on the furs near the fire, Taza spoke softly, his voice almost lost in the crackling flames. "You are mine," he said, not as a command, but as a truth born from mutual choice and protection. "Because you choose to be. And I am yours because I choose the same." Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of joy and relief. In a world filled with danger and uncertainty, she had found a path of her own making, one guided by love, respect, and trust. She leaned against him, the warmth of the fire and his presence surrounding her. For the first time, she felt truly alive. The frontier could be wild, unpredictable, and dangerous. But it had also brought her to this moment where choice, courage, and connection converged into something worth every risk. The trail ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, lessons, and discoveries yet to come. But Clara Whitmore no longer feared it. She had chosen her path, chosen Taza, and chosen to live fully, not merely survive. And that choice, brave, deliberate, and heartfelt, would define the rest of her life. The journey to Taza's people was long, winding through rugged canyons, sun-baked plains, and hidden valleys where even seasoned settlers seldom ventured. Clara rode beside Taza, her hands steady on the reins, her eyes wide with awe at the land's raw beauty. Every ridge and stream, every towering mesa and whispering wind, told stories she had never known, stories of survival, tradition, and deep connection to the earth. When they reached the encampment, a cluster of wickiups nestled beneath a protective canyon wall, Clara felt her heart race. She had entered this world as a stranger, an outsider, yet here she was, following a man who had saved her life and whose trust she had earned. Some of Taza's people watched her with caution. Few had seen a white woman in their midst before. Some whispered among themselves, wary of newcomers. But Taza's presence was commanding, quiet yet absolute. He did not speak over them, nor did he flaunt authority. He simply stood with Clara, presenting her not as a captive, but as a chosen companion. Taza spoke first, introducing Clara with respect and clarity. "This is Clara Whitmore. She has chosen to be here, to learn, to share our ways, and to walk beside me." A hush fell over the encampment. Then, one by one, members stepped forward, some with nods, some with small gestures of welcome. Clara felt the weight of their eyes, but also the warmth of their curiosity. She smiled, bowing her head slightly, acknowledging them and showing her willingness to learn. Over the coming weeks, Clara immersed herself in Apache life. She learned to ride with agility, track animals, and gather plants with care for their uses. She learned the language, slowly mastering phrases and meanings that carried more than words. They carried history, respect, and connection. She learned beadwork, fire-making, and the stories of ancestors who had walked this land long before settlers arrived. Taza was patient, never pressing too hard, letting her adapt in her own time. He shared his knowledge of survival and honor, teaching her to read the wind and the tracks of animals, to listen to the subtle signs of nature that most settlers overlooked. And in return, Clara shared her own knowledge how to mend fences, how to prepare goods for trade in town, how to speak with settlers with confidence and grace. Through this exchange, both learned that the gap between their worlds was not insurmountable. Respect, patience, and understanding could build bridges stronger than fear. One night, under a canopy of stars so bright it seemed the sky itself had descended, Clara and Taza sat together near the fire. The day's lessons had ended, the camp quiet except for the gentle crackle of embers. Taza looked at her with eyes that were both steady and tender. "You are mine," he said softly, not as a command, but as a vow born of trust and mutual choice. "Because you choose to be. And I am yours because I choose the same." Clara's heart swelled. She leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his presence, the steady strength that had carried her through danger and fear. "And I choose," she whispered. "Every day I choose this life with you, with your people, with this land." In that moment, the boundaries of culture, language, and past fears melted away. She realized that the frontier, harsh, wild, and unforgiving, had also given her a gift, the chance to see humanity in its full spectrum, to recognize courage, honor, and love wherever it might appear. The Apache encampment welcomed her fully, not merely as a guest but as a member of their community. She learned to celebrate their festivals, honor their ancestors, and share in the daily rhythms of life that blended survival with meaning. She and Taza walked side by side, their partnership one of equality, trust, and growing affection. Months later, when she looked back toward the distant homestead, Clara no longer felt the pull of fear or doubt. The frontier could be cruel, yes, but it had also brought her here, to this life, this love, and this people. She had chosen her path. She had chosen Taza, and together they had built something stronger than mere survival, a life of respect, courage, and shared hearts died as the fire flickered and the stars danced above. Clara rested her head against Taza's shoulder. The future was uncertain, as the frontier always was, but for the first time, she welcomed it with open arms. She was safe, she was loved, and she was home.